Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today, unfortunately, we have news that British actor Ian Holm has passed away at the age of 88 due to complications due to Parkinson's disease. Now, Ian Holm may not necessarily be a name that immediately comes to mind when you think of great actors, but regardless, the man was a very, very, very accomplished actor. Um, I'm going to highlight a few of the roles that I really like him from and that I think are really memorable and a lot of people really enjoy. He had an amazing set of acting credits. He had 137 acting credits according to IMDb. And he is just everywhere. He unfortunately a lot of the time he was not playing a lead character, but he was the best supporting guy you could probably get. He was a graduate of the Royal Shakespeare Company from back when it first started in the early 60s. And he moved into film almost seamlessly and he started doing a lot of really good roles. But his big breakout role was in 1979 when he played the character of Ash in the movie Alien by Ridley Scott. Now I will be spoiling Alien, but it was made in 1979. If you haven't seen it, that's not my problem. So basically, the Ash character is supposed to be he's the ship's doctor basically or medical personnel. And originally, he was put. We basically find out through the story that he was put on the ship by the company, the Weyland-Yutani company, that owns the ship and the cargo that's on board it and is paying the crew. So basically, Sigourney Weaver becomes distrustful of him, and after a while, he tries to kill her when she realizes that he has been facilitating the transport of this dangerous alien that has been killing all of them. And Ian Holm does an amazing heel turn in that film, and I think he does. See, here's the thing: is that we don't really see Ian Holm play the villain a whole lot. He's usually kind of in a lot of his roles, he's or at least a lot of his memorable roles, he's usually kind of he's a good guy, but he's usually kind of the next guy down. He's like the guy, he's like the right hand man of whoever the protagonist is in a lot of cases, or he's the next character up. Let's put it that, or the next character down, I should say. Um, but he in this movie does an amazing heel turn where he turns from kind of like this very intelligent, very arrogant, kind of douchey medical guy that has clashes with Sigourney Weaver's character into a machine, a literal machine, because he's an android, and they find out that he's an android because Yaphet Kotto, who plays Parker, he knocks his head off with a fire extinguisher. He decapitates him essentially with a fire extinguisher. Keep in mind, this is near the end of the movie, so this is just a complete brain fuck at this point. And the fact that he bleeds milk and stuff like that is pretty gross. But they also do a very good special effects shot where they have, well, I shouldn't say a very good special effects shot because it kind of starts out kind of crappy. It looks like a mannequin head, but eventually it becomes Ian Holm through a cut. But when Ian Holm is talking as a decapitated android, he's still convincing, and it's hard to do that. But he goes from kind of this character that's a little, antagonistic to full on, I'm going to kill you by shoving a magazine down your throat. Which, again, is a great scene. And his facial expressions, too, are really good because before Sigourney Weaver finds out about him, basically she pushes him into a wall and she hits him and she winds up cutting his head a little bit, and that's when he starts bleeding like the white liquid that they have for blood. Um, and then he goes and finds her in like the chamber with the computer they call Mother. And Sigourney Weaver is asking the computer, and she's just learned the horrible truth along with the audience. And as soon as she knows that, silently, Ian Holm sneaks up next to her and goes and just says something in her ear, and everybody jumps. The audience jumps when that happens. And it's a great moment by Ian Holm. And now, look, you have to give Ridley Scott and Sigourney Weaver a little bit of credit in that scene as well, but Ian Holm sells that scene. Because without him, without that creepy way that he's able to kind of just whisper in her ear, um, and then the subsequent scenes that followed, without that scene doesn't work. He sells that scene to you. And the other thing is that it kind of reveals in the story, which is, it's a bit of a greater meaning, is, this whole time they've all been running from this alien monster, and in reality, the monster has been among them the whole time, and it's Ian Holm's character of Ash. So I love that role, and I think he deservedly got boosted because of that. Now, his other major involvement, really, outside of Alien, a lot of people associate him with Lord of the Rings because he also played Bilbo Baggins. He did voice work for it, I believe, back in the early '80s, but he reprised the role in a physical sense in the Peter Jackson films, and then again in the Hobbit films later on. But I like him in that because again he's playing kind of another duality role, especially in Fellowship, where you have that great dialogue between him and Gandalf about the ring, and then you have that great moment where Bilbo kind of, you know, Gandalf has the ring, or Gandalf is reaching for the ring, if I remember correctly, and Bilbo kind of just, his face contorts and he changes, like, from a physical and from a vocal stance, and that's all Ian Holm. Except for the face stuff. The face stuff is CGI, I believe. But Ian Holm, like the body language and all that, the drastic change, like on a heel turn, just because of that ring, that was great because that was really what he was kind of good at, and he's kind of channeling a little bit of that maybe alien duality there with the heel turn, but he's able to do that in scenes, and it's something that actors can't always do, especially when they get into a role and they get into a scene. It's like you can't just turn the emotions on a heel turn. Necessarily, well, at least not in that sense. You might be able to go from like, happy to rage or something like that. It's easy to go to rage. Rage is like the easy one, but when you go to like creepy and possessive and like almost demonic, like what Ian Holm is able to do in that scene, it's very, very different. And he also plays the older version of Bilbo at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Return of the King, at the end when he goes off to the Elven land with Frodo. And again, he does a very good job of kind of portraying the older Bilbo Baggins because he's now aged faster without the ring. The ring gave him longevity, so now he's kind of, his body is suffering the effects of all the aging that he's been staving off by wearing, or not by wearing, but by possessing the ring. So I did like that as well. I didn't see his cameos in the Hobbit movies. I can assume that he probably was again channeling kind of that older Bilbo character. Now, another movie that people really enjoyed him in was Chariots of Fire, where he played the coach. And the thing is that he got an Academy Award nomination for that. That was a recognized film, and that's the thing too, that really propelled him up because that was not long after Alien. That was in the early '80s. So he had two really good hits back to back, and that really propelled his working career forward. Even though he didn't really have necessarily a ton of memorable roles, he was in big movies. He's been in movies like The Aviator, stuff done by Martin Scorsese. I think he's been in stuff by Quentin Tarantino, I'm pretty sure. He's been in stuff from obviously Ridley Scott, but he's been in a ton of different things as just kind of these side characters. Day After Tomorrow, where he plays one of the English scientists, which honestly I think Day After Tomorrow was not a bad disaster movie, and I think Ian Holm is a bright spot in that film. But going from that, we go into a role where I think he's a bit more, the Chariots of Fire role is kind of, it's very inspirational. He's the good guy. He wants good things, or at least he wants, success. It's supposed to be kind of an uplifting story. And then, he goes from that character, he went from that heel turn evil character to a good character. And that's even more difficult, is that he was able to play all different levels of the spectrum. He wasn't a guy that just, I only play heroes, or I only play villains, or I only play the crazy guy, or I only play this. Or he wasn't a typecast guy, which is great. He was also in Terry Gilliam's Brazil, as well, which I think every English actor got a role in that somewhere. But he's been in so many different films that it's kind of hard to pick and choose certain ones, other than some of the ones that I've mentioned. But kind of the last part of it too was comedy, and he really, you didn't really see him do too much comedy, I would say. I think he could be. I think he had a very wry sense of humor when you had him in certain films, but he hadn't done like full on kind of almost physical comedy, and he did that in The Fifth Element, where he plays the priest from the Space Temple. And when he comes in that movie, it's supposed to be the dire and everything like that. The Fifth Element is a very weird movie. It's a fun movie, but it's a very weird movie. But Ian Holm is kind of almost like this bumbling guy who's just he's always in a rush because he's trying to save the world, and he forgets half his stuff and he screws up and he forgets things half the time, and it's amusing to see him in that because it reminds me a little bit of kind of like a Mr. Bean almost, except maybe a bit more serious and a bit less goofy. You didn't go to the comically overdone level of goofiness that Mr. Bean usually likes to go to, but it felt a little bit like that, and maybe that's just because he's English and my brain's making the connection. But the type of comedy and the type of motions that he's doing in that movie are kind of similar. So I can kind of get that kind of a vibe from it, but again, he was able to go across the spectrum and be a proficient actor in almost all types of emotional output of a character, whether that is an evil guy, whether that's a good guy, whether that's a good guy becoming an evil guy, or whether that's a bad guy turning into a more bad guy, or if he's doing comedy. Again, like I said, he was in Brazil too, but which is kind of, yeah, I mean, it's a comedy, but it's weird. It's just a very weird movie. But you know, that's the thing is that Ian Holm was such a versatile and good actor, and it's a shame that he never really got his share of starring roles. I would say, like, I'm not saying like not getting a starring credit because he probably had dozens of those, but the idea that he's the story. He's the main guy in the story. Now, I'm sure he did get some of those films, but they're not as well known as some of his other works, unfortunately. But I think that's what we need to look back at when we think of Ian Holm, is we think of all these characters that he was able to bring to life in so many different genres and so many different types of characters, and make them all believable and make you feel the way you're supposed to feel about those characters when the movie wants you to feel that way. When the movie wants you to be afraid of Ash, you're afraid of Ash. When the movie wants you to think Ash is kind of a douchebag, Ash is kind of a douchebag. You know, it works very well for what you're trying to convey in the film. And like I said, he had great experience because of the his work with the Shakespeare Company. But like I said, that's just kind of my examination of some roles that I really liked Ian Holm in. But I want to know what your favorite roles for Ian Holm are. You can put those in the comments below, or anything about Ian Holm that you want to say. Feel free in the comments below, as long as it's not disparaging. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?